Hi everyone. Today I will be talking to you about the paper we wrote called Feedback-Driven Gradual Discovery for Expanding Musical Preferences. So why do we want to help users expand their preferences? We've been doing recommender systems for quite a while now. I think the first conference was almost 20 years ago. We're at number 19 now. So with some confidence in all the smart people here and the people that come before us, I would say recommender systems have gotten pretty good at finding out and delivering our exact known preferences, basically. However, you could argue that delivering your preferences self-reinforces them into a positive feedback loop that has been called the filter bubble. Existence of the filter bubble has been kind of contentious, but if you believe in it or not, we can recognize that a need for systems that support users in actively developing and exploring their preferences. So how do we create a system that encourages exploration? The key challenge here is that we are increasingly uncertain of the user's preferences for items the further we get away from their content areas they already consumed. So to get these unconsumed content areas, it will be safer to build upon and create a path from these already consumed items. So kind of the system goal that we're looking at, the scenario that we're looking at, is how can we guide the user from their current known preferences towards a target genre that they set themselves. We propose to do this in small gradual steps while taking user feedback into account. So the first thing we need to tackle for this is to create a space where moving between songs that are close to each other gives sensible transitions. So we can make these small steps in the space. For this, we can leverage the musical data we have by embedding it into a high-dimensional representation space, mapping it to some 2D map. You can kind of see the map that we have where we have genres are pretty well split. This can be done in a lot of ways depending on the data that you have. For our case, we used embedding techniques on a music knowledge graph. So next, to move through the space, we have to tackle first the curse of dimensionality, which means it's harder to move in these high-dimensional spaces. To combat this, we create a k-nearest neighbor graph with approximate nearest neighbor methods. In this graph, a song is connected to several of its nearest neighbors, and then we can move through this graph by following edges between the song's nodes in the graph. We define where to start and end the graph by identifying diverse central nodes between song nodes in the user and target subgraph. And then we generate a bunch of shortest paths between all start and target combinations. Okay, so now we have a bunch of paths for the user to follow to their target. But we need to address the uncertainty that we have of which path is the best to follow. For this, we use Bayesian active learning approach that balances exploration and exploitation of paths with Thompson sampling. So in Thompson sampling, we maintain a belief state of the utility over every path the user can follow in the form of a probability distribution. Initially, we know nothing about these distributions, so probabilities are uniform. To select items from the paths, we sample from the path's posterior distribution and select the top paths to recommend to the user. Songs at the current step in the process from selected paths are recommended, and then we receive feedback on these. Songs. In traditional Thompson sampling, this feedback is then used to update the belief state of this path, and sampling is repeated over again. However, we have a limited amount of steps in the scenario that we have, so we have a limited amount of feedback. So to improve the efficiency of feedback, we not only update the path for which we receive feedback, but we update all other paths based on their similarity to the path that we got feedback from. So that means if you like the song from a path, then another path that is very similar to that path will also get updated positively, almost as much as this path. So with the system, we are kind of stepping away from accuracy as a goal. So we follow a user-centric evaluation framework. We made kind of two important decisions in this system, which are reflected in the objective system aspects. So we have these gradual steps that we are taking compared to taking a large step from the user's preferences immediately to the target genre. And then we have this active approach where we incorporate feedback along the way to pick the paths, or a passive approach where we just randomly pick a path for every step. Then we measure outcomes. We measure experience outcomes and interaction outcomes to figure out the effectiveness of our system. And additionally, we measure subjective system aspects to kind of give more insight into why we are measuring certain experience or interaction aspects. So looking at the results, we'll first look at the experience outcomes, and we can see that both gradual steps and an active approach had a positive effect on helpfulness and affinity towards the target genre. Both of these measures were measured through survey data. This effect is similar for the interaction outcomes and of total likes and the proportion of target songs liked. So we can see that the enjoyment of the user measured by songs liked is larger overall for the groups taking gradual steps. Also, the enjoyment of the user towards the target genre is higher at the end of the experiment for both the SSP and SSA group. So now we look at intermediate effects of the subjective system aspects, and we can see that the effect of gradual steps on the user affinity towards the target genre is mostly mediated by its effect on personalization. This means that taking gradual steps increases the user's affinity because the user perceives the recommendations as more personal. We can also see that overall gradual steps in incorporating feedback had a large positive effect on all subjective aspects. So to summarize, we argue that guiding users beyond the comfortable borders of their musical tastes requires a delicate balance between exploration and exploitation of their preferences. We achieve this balance through gradual steps and continuous feedback integration using a Bayesian optimization procedure. And then finally, through user experiments, we demonstrate the potential of our feedback-driven approach for preference expansion to improve several aspects of this recommendation approach. Thank you.
Can you say something about potential future applications, like how you can move on with this work, or other people can move on with your work?
So this research has kind of been a proof of concept of this whole scenario of taking a user from their current preferences towards a target preference. So for future research, the immediate methods that we use can be easily maybe adapted and improved to see how that will affect the outcomes of these researches. Also, having some long-term research to see how this actually affects user interaction in actual systems. On the other hand, I think applying this to different modalities, maybe a different thing than genres in music, or maybe different modality like movies or news maybe, can also be very interesting.